derelicts. One of the things you'll have to deal with as a spacer is encountering empty ships and stations that have been long abandoned or decimated by attacks. Whatever the reason for being derelict, it's always haunting to imagine what must have gone so wrong to basically abandon these expensive marvels of engineering. Some spacers believe that the spirits of past crew haunt the corridors of the ships they die in, trapping their souls within the confines of a metallic coffin, as the restless spirits continue performing their duties in the afterlife. Occasionally, you'll hear the sound of tools banging on metal, or the creak of a lone gyroscope spurring to life as it tries in vain to rotate the derelict vessel. Of course, most of these phenomenon are explained away by simple technical faults due to lack of maintenance, a belief shared by most successful space pirates, including myself. After all, a derelict is easy pickings. Most of the time, it's just a dark corridor that leads into another dark corridor that leads into, you guessed it, another dark corridor. But the universe is a big and ever mysterious place. And one thing that I've learned from being out here for so long is that no amount of experience will ever truly prepare you for the unknown. In today's subject of discussion, we will be looking into what has been considered by some to be the worst space disaster on record. A ship designed for peace and exploration sent into an unknown and uncharted destination, disappearing with all hands for 7 years, until it mysteriously reappeared in the very same place where it had vanished. How it got there? Why? Well, I can't give you all the answers now, can I? What matters is that we've found it, and that means a rescue mission can be conducted to save the survivors, right? Or maybe this story is different. After all, the ship disappeared with all hands for 7 years. It went somewhere. But where exactly did it end up? What has it seen? More importantly, what's it brought back with it? As we dive into the terrifying tale of this mysterious vessel, we will uncover the dark inside us as we pierce through the boundaries of the known universe to explore horrors beyond imagination. Join me on this expedition as we pass through the Event Horizon. Event Horizon is a sci-fi horror film made in 1997. It was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who was more famously, or infamously in some circles, known for his work on the Resident Evil movies, as well as Alien vs. Predator, a kick-ass movie that I hope to get to one day. Still gotta get to Alien first. And Predator, for that matter. He also did that Mortal Kombat movie back in 1995. But more importantly, I need to clarify that I still intend to cover Fantastic Voyage, but I postponed it for this video after glancing at my calendar and realizing that we're in October, and it would be irresponsible of me as the captain to not pick a movie that properly gets us into the Halloween spirit. So I quickly made the decision to switch gears to something scary, and I hastily decided on Event Horizon, a haunted house movie with a science fiction skin. I first watched this movie when I was just in middle school, and I love it to this day. It's also the movie that introduced me to the late great Prodigy, whose song Funky Shit plays at the end of the movie. The soundtrack itself is composed as a collaboration between orchestral composer Michael Kamen and the electronic music duo known as Orbital. As it stands, the movie is a cult classic among sci-fi fans like myself. Though you'll usually find very mixed opinions on this film. Some find it to be a little over the top or too campy, while others will praise this movie for its interesting concept and well-paced execution. I personally really love this movie, but I can admit that it has its flaws. Of course, these flaws don't really detract from the overall experience, at least to me. Event Horizon is still a fun ride. It's also a fun ride that I'd like to get into, so let's not waste any more time. These monologues are long enough as it is, and I'm eager to find out what awaits us on this expedition. Let us now cross the Event Horizon. The movie begins with a long, flashy credits sequence because they were really proud of this one. Also, it looks like somebody filmed a toilet cleaner mid-flush and used it to make a black hole effect. You know, when nobody gave a shit about what black holes actually looked like. We then get some background on the universe we're getting into. Basically, it says that humans did space. They built a ship to explore the local solar system known as the Event Horizon, but the ship was lost with all hands, somewhere around Neptune. It is labeled as the worst space accident on record. We then open on 7 years later. An asteroid flies past a strange spacecraft shaped charmingly like a cross. The ship is revealed to be the Event Horizon, as mentioned before, except the ship appears to be derelict, despite the lights being on. This specific situation would be pretty atypical for spacers to encounter, because usually a derelict would lose power over time, especially without a crew to maintain it for 7 years. So either this ship has a kick-ass power supply, or whatever happened here was recent. Or some third thing involving cosmic horrors beyond our comprehension, but we can hardly entertain the notion of that right now. Inside, we see random objects floating around. Then we see a body floating in zero gravity, brilliantly composed to look like a crucifixion, with the cold blue cross-shaped window framing the subject in its center. Welcome to our subject of today's adventure, Dr. Weir. He wakes up and looks longingly at a photograph of his wife. Obviously, he hasn't seen her in a long time. He shaves in the bathroom, but seems haunted by the sight of the bathtub. Looks like some unresolved problems up in that noggin. He grabs a coffee and looks out the window of this massive space station where he's staying. This is Daylight Station, currently settled in low Earth orbit, or LEO, as is the official acronym for the term. I always imagined early colonization looking something like this: easily constructible modular systems that can be interchanged as needed. This is awesome! I can't wait to see more of... Oh, we're leaving. Okay. So this cult classic is already taking from the Star Crystal school of establishing shit that means nothing to the rest of the movie. Instead, we are now aboard the USAC search and rescue ship Lewis and Clark, outbound from Daylight Station and preparing a flight vector for Neptune. Its mission is top secret. The crew doesn't know the details of this mission and asks Captain Captain Miller, why they can't just go to Mars.
Mars has got women.
Of course, the captain remains stoic about the situation. They are a search and rescue craft, after all. They're essentially the space equivalent of a first responder. Out here, we have similar job types, since it was discovered by a study at the Institute of Cydonia that most ships would refuse responding to distress signals out of fear of getting attacked by pirates. You can imagine that this has made business significantly slower for me. That's why I've been making these videos on the side. When someone needs help, they go. No questions asked. So after securing all crew stations, they set the ion drive to engage in 10 minutes. The crew then moves out to prepare for stasis.
Mr. Cooper.
Skipper.
Ion drive in 10 minutes.
Ooh, it's time to play Spam in the Can.
Weir attempts to speak with Captain Miller, but Miller keeps brushing him off. After all, they've got 10 minutes to get ready for transit, which means clock is ticking. Weir gets the impression that Miller doesn't like him.
I think the captain has some kind of a problem with me.
Oh, well, don't worry about him. He just loves having complete strangers on his ship.
DJ offers Weir a puff of his cigarette, a sign of tolerance. This will often be the most nice another space crew can get. Unless you're NASA. Everyone's a goody two-shoes at NASA. Weir asks if the grav couches are necessary, which is an odd question considering his job title. But we'll come back to this when we have the context. DJ informs Weir, and by proxy we, the audience, that the grav couches are designed to protect against harsh G-forces when the ion drive activates, as it was set to on a timer of 10 minutes. The G-force will be so powerful that it can liquefy your skull, about 30 Gs according to DJ. If you need help getting an idea of what that feels like, the gravity on Earth that you are constantly fighting against to stand upright is equal to 1 G. Imagine that times 30. You know how much it hurts to trip and fall on the ground in 1 G? You usually walk away with nothing more than a scrape or a bruise. At 30 times that, tripping and falling over would have the equivalent force of leaping from Mount Everest and plummeting all the way back down to sea level. Of course, this assumes you haven't already been crushed by the force of the gravity alone. We're not playing with Star Wars rules out here. The grav couches appear to be designed to keep the occupants sealed in some kind of liquid that helps to negate the harsh effects of G-forces. To talk about this for a moment, I feel like they are describing a direct flight path, which is an uncommon practice in space travel, but I can explain how it works. Space Engine's autopilot has a similar function. Once a destination is selected and calculated, the journey begins by establishing a flight vector, which is essentially adjusting your relative speed to your target so that you can begin the next phase, transit. Now, a direct transit is easy to understand in practice. Once you have a flight vector, you simply burn in the direction of your target and maintain that burn for about half of the calculated transit time. At said halfway point, the ship will then rotate 180 degrees and fire its engines in the retro positions to slow the craft down, and it will continue to do so for the remainder of the journey. If this is calculated and executed correctly, and if you have the fuel, you can arrive at a deep space destination in a matter of days, as opposed to the more calculated and cost-effective slingshot method, which can take years. The Luna C is capable of performing direct transits to great effect with our stack repulsion tech, and because of our inertia dampening systems on board, we don't even need grav couches. But if you get motion sick, you're in for a bad day. Please use a bag. Boy, that was a big side tangent. Let's get back on track. We're and the crew board the grav couches, and we cut to 56 days later. Considering how far away Neptune is, getting there in 56 days is a feat that is deserving of an award. But again, direct transits just work like that. We get some shots of the ship's interior while everyone is still asleep. Weir then hears a voice. So I know there is a logical explanation for this, but I had to do a double take, because if he's in the grav couch, surrounded by all that liquid, how the fuck is he hearing someone whisper his name? If you've ever gone swimming before, you know what I mean. When you completely submerge your head like that, the water diffuses the sound waves, causing them to be muffled and often inaudible, at least until you resurface. So from Weir's perspective, it should sound like this. Well, at any rate, Weir hears the voice and wakes up in his grav couch. However, the rest of the crew is still in stasis. Weir's pod is drained and opened, and he steps out into the Lewis and Clark alone. This is more a nightmare that the captain would be having. See, this is why I hate stasis as a deep space travel method. Just learn to not be scared and love the void like the rest of us, and you'll do just fine. Weir is a little confused and concerned that he's the only one who has awakened from stasis. He then hears the whispering voice again and proceeds to investigate it. So that can just happen? That bunk door has been shut for 56 days, and you're telling me Weir just has to release one silent fart to spring it open? What what is this piece of shit spaceship even made of? Well, Weir continues investigating and arrives at the bridge, where we make a shocking discovery. Neptune has women too, and they're naked. Weir realizes that this naked woman is his wife, which is weird because she's not supposed to be there. Also, she's naked.
I'm waiting.
So Weir wakes back up in the grav couch, but he's missing his air mask. Which, I mean, if you just put it back on, you'll be fine. You're panicking over nothing, you goofball. So everything from before was just a dream. Fortunately, Peters drains his grav couch and rushes to his aid. DJ helps as well and informs Weir that he'll be experiencing some disorientation from the 56 days in stasis. Cooper then offers Weir a cup of coffee, and Weir declines, still getting over his panic attack. Cooper then offers Stark a cup of coffee, or at least it's supposed to sound like coffee.
What about you, Stark? Would you like something hot and black inside you?
Stark flips him off, and the captain then takes charge, as he should, telling his people to basically get moving. We then see a home video of Peter's son, that she's watching from her tablet, which back in 1997 was considered futuristic. If you sit a child down in front of a normal computer screen today, however, you know the first thing they're gonna do is start touching the screen and wondering why nothing is happening. This is a fun time capsule of a moment. Captain Miller tells Peters that he tried to find a replacement for her, but with such short notice, it was impossible. He apologizes, but Peters is understanding, even if she's not happy about it. She knows her captain can't part the seas, but he at least appears to care about his crew beyond their ability to do their jobs, and I respect that as a captain. It does suck, though, that these are the conditions that put her on this mission to begin with, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Smith informs the crew that they will be arriving in orbit around Neptune in about 2.5 hours. The crew gathers around the table, and the captain briefly introduces his crew. Stark is XO, Justin is on engineering, Cooper is a rescue technician,
This is Peters, medical technician.
Smith is the pilot, and DJ is a trauma specialist. Something Justin finds funny for some reason, and it seems to confuse DJ as much as it confuses me. Captain Miller then asks Weir to explain his top secret mission to the crew, since they've arrived at the destination.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say how much I appreciate this opportunity to join you in what I...
We're sure that you appreciate being here, Doctor, but you must understand, we don't. We were taken off a well-deserved leave and sent into Neptune space. We are now 3 billion clicks from the nearest outpost. The last time USAC attempted a rescue this far past the outer reach, well, we lost both ships, so if you please.
Weir, after being so rudely interrupted, then explains that everything he's about to tell them has been designated Code Black by the NSA. USAC intercepted a radio transmission in a decaying orbit around Neptune. The source of the transmission has been identified as the event Horizon. The crew thinks it's bullshit, but Miller sits them back down so Weir can continue. Weir explains that the official story behind the event Horizon was really a cover-up for a different mission entirely. Instead, the ship was made as a sort of test for a warp drive, or as the movie refers to it, a gravity drive. Weir attempts to explain the gravity drive, but the crew doesn't understand all the big words.
Well, fuck layman's terms. Do you speak English?
So Weir uses an explanation that might sound familiar to some of you already. The idea is that rather than traveling a great distance to arrive at a destination, you could simply arrive at your destination. No need for acceleration, so no extreme g-forces are applied. No worries about structural integrity. Very simply put, you just show up. How? Well, easy. On the paper, you have a point A and a point B. Weir explains that instead of traveling in a straight line, that space-time itself can simply curve until both outbound and inbound nodes exist in the same space. The ship then passes through the nodes, and space-time then returns to normal. If this sounds familiar, That's because Interstellar used this explanation as well. Now, before you start accusing Interstellar of stealing from Event Horizon, know that Event Horizon wasn't the first place where this idea was introduced. In fact, it wasn't even introduced in a movie. See, this is an actual theoretical concept that scientists have been discussing for some time now. One prominent example of this concept was known as the Alcubierre warp drive, a ring-shaped drive that would form a warp bubble of sorts around a spacecraft, represented by this football-shaped object. This warp drive concept inspired a NASA engineer named Harold White to design a spacecraft known as the IXS Enterprise. This ship, however, along with the warp drive, only exist as concepts by their creators, and haven't been tested. But it has captured the imagination of the space community, and seeing it even on paper fills me with optimism. So Event Horizon came up with this explanation from a real discussion about warp drives, and so did Interstellar. It's less plagiarizing the work and more pulling from the same inspiration as the work. That inspiration being science. So now that the gravity drive makes sense to the crew, Weir explains that he knows so much about it because he built it. Now we know why he's here. And why him needing to ask about the grav couch being necessary is just so fucking weird to me. You built a warp drive for a deep space exploration ship that was the first of its kind, and you need to ask if a grav couch is necessary? What the fuck? Whatever. Weir then explains that the ship was running perfectly, using its main propulsion to reach a safe distance. Neptune, in this case. They were authorized to open the gateway to Proxima Centauri, which is a real star system and is in fact our closest neighbor in the interstellar community. If warp drives were ever built, this would likely be the first destination we'd visit. When the Event Horizon activated the gravity drive, it disappeared. Now, 7 years later, the ship has reappeared in a decaying orbit around Neptune. And the crew of the Lewis and Clark are here to figure out where it's been all this time. Weir brings the crew to this area behind the bridge and explains that life could not be verified on board the ship. However, TDRS received a transmission from the ship. And it just sounds so wonderful. The fucking hell is that? Weir then informs them that Houston passed the recording through a few filters and came out with what sounds like a voice. Weir isn't sure if it even qualifies as language, but DJ is pretty sure it's Latin. Makes Weir look pretty stupid as a scientist to not recognize Latin as a language. He attempts to translate it and thinks the voice is saying "Liberate me," which according to the movie translates to "save me." The ship's alarms alert that they are on approach, and so the crew all report to their stations. They adjust their descent angle and move into Neptune's upper ionosphere. They lock onto the Event Horizon's beacon and fly through the storm. As they approach the ship, visibility becomes extremely low. They end up on top of it and still can't see it until it's right in front of them. They engage reverse thrusters and avoid a collision as they admire the scale of this spacecraft. Okay, before I go on, I need to get this nitpick out there. Why are we doing this in the upper ionosphere? Now, don't get me wrong, it gives us an excuse to have this fun lightning storm effect for the haunted house vibe. But the reason I ask is because the movie treats being in the upper ionosphere as the same thing as being in an orbit. They aren't in a hover, they're in zero gravity. But if you're in the ionosphere, you can't do that, because the drag will just cause you to plummet. You need to be outside the atmosphere entirely in order to achieve orbit. and you need to be in orbit to be experiencing zero gravity. Does that make sense? So having the ship be in the upper ionosphere in the state that it's in is physically impossible. It is not in orbit because it's in the atmosphere, and it doesn't seem to be experiencing any drag, yet the Lewis and Clark, alongside the event horizon, seem to just be suspended in the air, like gravity is just turned off. Now, before you offer the explanation that it's a hell ship and it can just do that, that doesn't explain the physics for the Lewis and Clark, the crew, all the loose objects, and the crew just acts like this is all normal, so nobody points it out as weird or strange. Hell ship is not a valid reason for disregarding physics. But whatever, it's a nitpick, but it's one that hurts my brain every time I watch this movie. I do have one explanation, but it's less to do with physics and more to do with filming constraints. See, in some of the trailer material, the event horizon actually appears in orbit of Neptune, which in that case, the physics are justified. But somebody probably really wanted an excuse to do the dark and stormy night setting, so made a compromise. However, since the movie was already planned for them to be in orbit, it would have been too much effort to justify the physics of it, so they most likely chose not to save time, but have the setting they wanted anyways. They compliment Weir's big spaceship and start looking for a place to board. Weir points out the main airlock and tells them to dock there. Miller orders Smith to use the arm to grab a small antenna cluster to keep them from drifting. Remember this decision for later.
Go very carefully here. That is not a load-bearing structure.
It's now, Doctor.
That fucking reaction is hilarious. Getting griefed in space engineers be like. Stark reports that the Event Horizon's reactors are still active, and that there's some small radiation sources, but nothing is leaking. The gravity is turned off, and apparently the thermal systems aren't working as well. Unfortunately, the deep cold from the thermal systems being down isn't a good sign. No crew can survive freezing temperatures that cold. And they're supposed to be the search and rescue team. Stark runs a bioscan but gets these strange readings. Trace life forms that are all over the ship for some reason. Stark thinks it's a glitch, so Miller decides that the best course of action is to search for the crew on foot. The crew gets ready to deploy, but Weir is instructed to stay on the ship. Weir protests this, but Miller is the captain and his word is law. He assures that Weir can come aboard once the ship is secured. Weir still protests this, but Miller is an unmoving mountain who has made up his mind and isn't putting up with Weir's bullshit. Weir is instructed to guide the crew from the communications area. He's reluctant, but he doesn't have much of a choice with Miller. The umbilicus extends. The crew suits up, and they cross over to the main airlock. They enable their magnetic boots. And I have to say it again, magnetic boots are not that great, and I do not recommend. They open the outer door, releasing pressure from the ship. Fortunately, with the umbilicus in place, they can contain any pressure lost from the main ship, which is helpful in avoiding decompression sickness in any survivors. Not that decompression is the worst thing the original crew had to worry about. The crew enters the central corridor of the ship. It connects the personnel areas at the front of the ship to engineering in the back. Miller instructs Justin to move to engineering, while he and Peters investigate the forward decks. A water bottle floats by, making water sloshing noises, even though this ship is supposed to be in a deep cold. I guess this is just magic water. Miller then finds explosive charges, and Weir explains that they're for separating personnel from engineering in the event of an emergency, because using decouplers isn't bombastic enough in 2047. The idea being that the forward decks can act as a lifeboat. Miller arrives in medical, and there doesn't appear to be any bodies. This isn't as atypical as you might imagine, but only if the ship was designed with lifeboats. Medical personnel on board most large spacecraft have special evacuation protocols for the patients they treat. So no bodies isn't necessarily a bad sign, except the event horizon doesn't have lifeboats. Miller is in the lifeboat. So where is the crew? Miller scans for signs of life, but there is nothing here.
This place is a tomb.
Oh, fuck me!
Oh, fuck yourself, movie. Miller reports that he's okay.
Fine.
Justin then arrives at engineering. He opens the hatch, and what in the holy fuck is that? Why though? Why? What the fuck? Weir explains that this is what allows you to enter the second containment where the gravity drive is located without compromising the magnetic fields. Peters makes it to the bridge and notices some blood, yet fails to notice the literal dead space goop just over yonder. Justin enters second containment and points out that coolant has leaked everywhere. Coolant appears on reserves, but Justin reports nothing to worry about. Peters continues investigating the bridge when Weir asks her to stop and turn around. They find the ship's logs. If anything is going to tell them about where this ship has been, the log will tell them everything. Peters ejects a CD, which back in the day was also considered to be the future of media. I feel old. The CD is stuck, however, but Peters keeps trying at it. Something floats by behind her, though. She manages to get the CD.
What the hell happened to his eyes?
Explosive decompression.
Decompression doesn't do that.
DJ suggests that it looks like an animal did this. But if that's the case, what animal? And where?
Corpsicle.
You're not worried about the animal part? I saw that scene in Ad Astra, and I about shit myself. How are you so calm about this? Justin scans for life forms, but picks up more strange readings that don't make sense. The lights to second containment activate, revealing a massive object in the center of the room. Behold, the gravity drive! And look again. Ring-like objects around another object in its center. The writers were on the right track. But this isn't exactly what Alcubierre had envisioned. The rings in this case should be encompassing the ship, and not some random ball in the middle of engineering. But it's a sci-fi movie, and I can learn to let these things slide if the movie entertains me. Justin isn't sure what to make of the massive spinning object, as despite being an engineer, the concept of a gravity drive is still foreign to Justin. Then, the rings suddenly stop rotating, as if it knew Justin entered the room.
You're breaking up.
The Lewis and Clark lose visual on Justin's camera. And then the gravity drive flashes a bright light into Justin's face. The gravity drive then decides to cosplay as a Stargate from that other movie about dimensional space travel, and the bioscan goes insane. Justin, not understanding what he's looking at, chooses to approach the gravity drive, but looking at it doesn't seem to give Justin the information he wants, so he just sticks his whole ass hand in the thing. See, by doing this, Justin is able to gather valuable information about the gravity drive. Information relating to the consistency of the strange liquid, temperature, and overall composition of... Yeah, no, I'm kidding. He gets fucked up. What did you expect was going to happen when sticking your hand in something weird? Justin doesn't even attempt to communicate what is happening or what he's doing. This is just getting lax with protocol and making a bad decision. Cooper sees that Justin's safety line is moving rapidly, and Cooper calls in that he's going to move out and assist Justin. Rescue tech, going to work, baby! You're going to learn to love Cooper by the end of this movie. He is hands down my favorite character. The gravity drive emits a powerful shockwave that is felt across the entire ship, and Miller gets pushed back by the shockwave. The shockwave then hits the Lewis and Clark, and they encounter critical damage. Miller recovers and immediately demands everyone to sound off. But they're a little busy trying not to die right now, so please hold, Miller. Smith tells everyone to abandon ship while he contains the situation for as long as he can. Weir points out that the Lewis and Clark is bleeding atmosphere, and Stark escorts Weir to the airlock to get him suited up. Cooper quickly follows Justin's line into the gravity drive, and Justin floats out, appearing completely lifeless. Cooper catches him, but they begin to spiral in the spiky death room that is obviously a workplace hazard that should have been thought out more. Weir, I'm specifically looking at you. This room is a clear OSHA violation, but something tells me that OSHA doesn't have jurisdiction this far out in deep space, or Weir's story would have ended long before we started the movie. Fortunately, Cooper and Justin land safely on a blob of coolant, so they got about as lucky as you can get in this situation. Smith reports to Miller that the Lewis and Clark is basically screwed and won't be able to sustain life functions in a few moments. Weir then quickly suggests boarding the Event Horizon, since the ship has working air and power. Though Smith seems to know he's in a horror movie, and even while things are exploding around his ears, he's refusing to board the more stable ship. Of course, knowing what I know, I wouldn't even get near that thing. But Smith has no reason to know anything. He just hates the vibe of it. Smith is outranked, however, as the Event Horizon seems to be the best option for escaping a terrible fate. Keyword, seems to be. Peters gets the thermal and gravity systems online, and I know this is a movie, but are we working with Wile E. Coyote rules with the coolant here? That's not how gravity works. But I'll admit it, it looked good anyways. It's clear this movie cares more about being flashy than being scientific, but I can accept that as long as it doesn't detract from the viewing experience. Oh, and they shattered the corpsicle. Peters seems like she's over it, though. The actress really sells to me that she's a first responder who has had experience with seeing bodies. I imagine the disasters you'd have to respond to would be fucking nightmare fuel, and that's without the Lovecraft shit. The best way I can describe working on a deep space ship is that death is always on the other side of the window. That comforting reality means that if so much as a needle goes through the hull, I lose all my lung juice and die. It's happened to other ships before. Captain sets their course, they go to bed, the oxygen shuts off, and the captain never wakes up again. That's just one way you can eat it out here. Don't even get me started on all the ways people have died from workplace accidents and catastrophic failures. I've seen people get gummed up in a gear mechanism because they stuck their hand in the works. Ever heard of the Byford Dolphin incident? We have what's called the Galleon 4 disaster. The entire crew exploded. Not the ship, the crew. Man, I gotta stop going on these tangents. Okay, we gotta focus. Let's hone this back in. Power is now fully restored to the ship, and the crew are on the bridge assessing the current situation. Weir has managed to get most of the primary systems online, but doesn't sound like it's guaranteed to hold. Stark reports that their communications are down, and repairs don't seem to be possible. But why? I mean, how bad could it... You ever make a decision in a D&D campaign that seems completely harmless, but turns out to come back and bite you in the ass? To make matters worse, the air is getting filled with carbon dioxide, and the CO2 filters on the Event Horizon are completely shot. Miller suggests using the scrubbers on the Lewis and Clark, and Stark estimates that doing so would give them 20 hours of oxygen. But they need to be on their way before then, or they're basically screwed. Meanwhile, Smith is outside making repairs to the Lewis and Clark. It appears that there's a massive fracture on the hull, but repairs are possible. Smith says it may take a while though, but Miller tells Smith that more time is impossible. 20 hours is the time. That's the best they've got. Also, nobody has brought up the goop yet.
What happened here, Doctor?
Oh hey, they did it! Yay! Meanwhile, Justin is in medical, being looked after by Peters and DJ. His vital signs are stable, but he's unresponsive. DJ isn't sure what's wrong and believes he could either wake up in a few minutes or not at all for all he knows. On the bridge, Cooper attempts to explain to Miller about what happened in the gravity drive. But Weir doesn't buy his story, because what Cooper is describing is the gateway being opened. A guy who has only heard about the gravity drive this morning describes in detail a phenomenon that you're familiar with and can even logically explain, but you think he's bullshitting you? Miller tells them both to stand down and gives it to them straight. Justin is in serious condition, and whatever happened to him could happen to everyone. Miller believes that Cooper saw something and asks Weir to provide some kind of explanation.
Well, in my view, Mr. Cooper's delusional, if you don't mind my saying so. But maybe he saw an optical effect caused by gravitational distortion.
An optical effect? That's fucking poetic. Where the fuck, Cooper? Sorry. All right.
Miller asks what could create a gravitational distortion, like what Weir is describing. And Weir explains that if a burst of gravity waves escaped the core, like the shock wave we saw, it could distort space-time and make Justin seem as though he disappeared. It also would have been responsible for damaging the Lewis and Clark. How this isn't the explanation you want to accept is beyond me, Weir. Miller asks what's inside the core of the drive, and Weir tells him that it's complicated. Miller doesn't much care for that answer and presses the matter again. Weir brings Miller to the gravity drive and explains that the inside of the drive contains a black hole, which makes sense given the nature of warp drives themselves. You know what? Let me make the clarification because I know the terminology is getting mixed up. A warp drive is the official term, but the movie insists on calling this thing a gravity drive. Hopefully that clears up any confusion. Weir then explains that the black hole is what allows them to bend space-time. The Lewis and Clark would take over 1,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri, but the event horizon could be there in a day. Miller then postulates that if Justin was pulled through this gateway, then he could have ended up where the event horizon has been. Weir agrees with this reasoning, but insists that the gravity drive is perfectly safe. Too late though, because Miller has heard enough. Miller orders the room off limits, but Weir continues insisting that it's safe.
Doctor, my ship is in pieces and one of my crewmen may not make it home alive. No one else goes near this thing.
Miller leaves, but Weir isn't too happy about these orders. And something weird is going on between him and the gravity drive. Meanwhile, in medical, Peters is still trying to get something out of the ship's log when she hears a noise. She brushes it off as nothing, but she hears it again. She checks her comms and asks where DJ is. DJ reports that he's on deck 4. Well, that's good to know. Peters then grabs a bone saw and slowly goes to investigate the noise. Then, what looks like a hand brushes against the tarp of one of the medical beds. Peters moves in, ready to kill. She then removes the tarp to reveal something truly disturbing.
Mommy?
Peters sees her son, and his legs are horribly messed up. Peters takes -20 psychological damage from this, but DJ moves in and gives her a mental health buff. And it works because the bad juju has now vanished. But Peters must now roll for 1d6 damage. Smith returns from repairs, and Cooper says that Smith has been out there for a while. Smith says that he'd rather be out there than in the ship. I don't blame him either, but again, he has no idea to know that it's haunted yet. Peters then pulls up the last entry on the ship's log for the crew to see. It shows the captain introducing and thanking his crewmen. Weir says that this is John Kilpack, the ship's captain. Kilpack reports that they are about to engage the gravity drive. He then says, "Hail and farewell" in Latin. Then everything gets all messed up. Peters says that she'll try to run it through a few filters and clean it up. Then, the power begins to drain. Weir says that the core is causing this and rushes off, with Miller chasing behind. Weir says that it could be a short in the failsafe circuit, and decides to investigate inside this weird green crawl space. Meanwhile, Justin is having what appears to be a seizure. DJ moves in to help.
Who's coming? The dark.
Right, so anyways, Weir is crawling around this maze that looks like a hidden level in Cube and finds the damage. He sets to work on repairing, but hears that whispering voice saying his name again. He tries ignoring it, but it whispers louder at him. Then, the lights in the crawl space start going out. The lights are flickering, Weir is panicking, the whispering is getting louder, and Weir calls out to Miller that something is wrong.
Be with me. Forever.
Oh, looks like his wife fixed the power for him. Well, that was nice of her. Now, if only she'd put on some clothes. Well, all this is going on, but how is Miller doing?
Dr. Weir!
Oh, hi. Wait a minute. Who are you?
DJ suggests that maybe it was a hallucination brought on by carbon dioxide. But Miller doesn't buy it, not for a second. Peters admits to seeing her son on the examination table, but Weir interjects and tries to gaslight her into thinking that it was just shock from seeing the body. But she shuts his ass down, stating that she's seen bodies before. After all, space first responder right here. Miller is convinced that this stuff can't just be in their heads, and asks Smith if maybe he's seen anything. Smith says no, but elects that this ship is basically screwed.
This ship is fucked.
Well, thank you for that scientific analysis, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, we don't need to...
All right, Doc.
Smith loses his shit on Weir and accuses him of murdering the last crew and trying to murder them now. DJ then puts a knife to Smith's throat, telling him that it's just a ship and that he needs to calm the fuck down. Look who's fucking talking, DJ. Miller gestures for DJ to put the knife down, and DJ does so. DJ apologizes, and Smith uses the opportunity to lunge at Weir again. Now it's Miller's turn to lose his nerve. Miller orders Smith to go back out with Cooper and finish the repairs on the Lewis and Clark. Smith complies and walks away. In the corridor, Stark catches up to Miller and tells him that she has a theory based on those life scans they did earlier. She suggests that the hallucinations are acting as some kind of immune system for the ship. The ship appears to be what's reacting to them, and the reactions are getting stronger. Stark postulates that the event horizon brought back some kind of life force, but it's not an explanation that Miller is satisfied with. He only wants to survive the next 10 hours. Meanwhile, Peters is looking after Justin in medical. She paces the room a couple times, then notices that Justin is gone now. She looks around the room, but is stopped by a loud bang and a power shortage. Peters braces for whatever is coming in, but it stops. Fuck this fucking ship, why did we even show up here? I just wanted to go to a birthday party and I'm out here getting haunted by fucking space ghosts. So Peters flees for the bridge and seals the door behind her in a panic. DJ tries to calm her down, but whatever was banging on the door has followed them to the bridge. Peters panics again, and Weir decides to be the neighborly one and stands up to open the door. Stark manages to stop Weir though because she's a demon racist and doesn't tolerate them in her house. Weir stands down. But then the airlock alarm starts blaring. Miller reports that nobody is in there, but Peters figures it out before everyone else and rushes to the airlock. They round the corner, but it's too late. Justin has stepped into the airlock and sealed himself in. Stark reports the situation to Miller, and Cooper volunteers to move to his position. Miller orders Cooper to stand down and continue repairs, and Miller goes to Justin instead. The crew can't get the door open, so Peters attempts to talk Justin down, and Justin tells her that the dark inside of him from the other place shows him horrible things, and that he refuses to go back. Peters tells Justin to open the door and come back in, but Justin doesn't seem like he's changing his mind. He starts moving toward the control panel, and then he does this, I think specifically to be a troll toward Peters. So Justin does his best Quasimodo impression with the alarms before realizing that he's in the airlock, because Justin wasn't even in control that whole time. Justin pleads helplessly for the others to open the door, but his fate is sealed. Yes, the pun is intended, I'm not a coward. Miller gets patched in and tries to keep Justin calm. Justin is not calm about any of this, and it's going to get worse. Let's actually take a slight detour to talk about decompression. You see, there are 3 types of known decompression: explosive, rapid, and slow. Explosive decompression is when the force is strong enough to cause brutal damage to the human body, often resulting in parts of the body exploding, or in the case of the Byford Dolphin incident, as mentioned earlier, violently ripped apart. The likelihood of surviving an explosive decompression is very little. However, despite the gruesome nature of it, it happens so fast that your brain wouldn't be able to process the pain. Rapid decompression is when the force is powerful enough to suck the air out of your lungs. It's not as powerful as an explosive decompression, but if help isn't given to the victim quickly, death is a likely outcome. The movie is depicting the 3rd type, slow decompression. The airlock is slowly losing pressure and air, and Justin's body can't handle it. Miller tries to give Justin instructions, but I don't think Justin can hear right now on account of the internal bleeding and likely ruptured eardrums. The outer door opens. Justin floats out. Miller jumps, catches Justin, and gets him back inside. The crew open the inner door, and Justin is now aboard. Unfortunately, he's horribly disfigured from the pressure change. Weir sits up on the bridge, and while the crew is thinking about Justin, he's thinking about that gravity drive. Engineers have weird kinks, I suppose. They managed to stabilize Justin, but now he has to remain in stasis until they can get him the proper medical care he needs. Stark reports that the air will become toxic in 4 hours. Peters says she can work with the log on the bridge, but refuses to go back to medical now. Stark then mentions that Justin said something about the dark inside me, which sounds like a Shadow the Hedgehog quote. But whatever. Miller asks Weir what that could mean, and Weir just walks off. Miller isn't going to take that for an answer, though, and chases him down. He lambasts Weir for basically being the most useless person here. A specialist who doesn't know what's happening on his own ship? That's laughable. Miller demands to know where the gateway leads, but Miller admits he doesn't know. Weir explains that a lot is going on here that doesn't make sense, and he needs time to formulate an explanation. Miller points out that time is not something they have, and walks off. Miller then hears a voice calling out to him for help. Miller is disturbed by this and takes a moment to calm himself down.
It's just in your head.
Miller sits with DJ and tells him that he heard the voice of a young bosun named Eddie Corrick. He explains that he and Eddie served together on a ship called the Goliath. The Goliath's O2 tanks ruptured, and only 4 of them made it to the lifeboat. Eddie was still on board when the fire broke out and burned alive inside the ship. Eddie's final moments were spent pleading to Miller to save his life. But Miller chose to close the hatch to save the other 4 crewmen. Since that day, Miller swore to never lose another man. So that explains the Burning Man from earlier, at least. DJ is surprised. He's known Miller for a long time, and he's never heard that story. And as Miller points out, that's because he never talked about it with anybody. Yet somehow, the ship knew, as if it just dug it up on his brain's hard drive. DJ then decides to inform Miller that he had actually messed up the translation from earlier. He thought the message was saying, "Liberate me," or "save me," but it's actually "Liberate tutte me," which actually translates to something else entirely. The next part sounds like ex inferis. Altogether, you have "Liberate tutte me, ex inferis."
Save yourself from hell.
Miller asks if DJ believes in hell, but DJ's response is very rational, stating that whoever sent that message certainly believes in hell. Cooper then gets on comms and reports to Miller that they're ready to pressurize the Lewis and Clark. The Lewis and Clark starts being pumped with air, and everything seems to be holding. Then it doesn't hold. Cooper assures, though, that he can have it resealed in 20 minutes. Peters keeps at filtering the log, and Stark gives her some coffee, even though it's cold. Then, as if it was magic, the video cleans itself and plays for them to see. I won't show the footage because YouTube is squeamish, and we don't want to offend their sensibilities. Instead, I will give a flowery description of what's happening. The original crew of the Event Horizon is covered in ketchup and playing a game of naked wrestling with each other. Also, the captain of the Event Horizon is revealed to be the one speaking the Latin phrase, and he has his jelly orbs removed from their chassis. We'll go with that.
We're leaving.
No, we can't leave. Our orders are specific.
Rescue the crew, salvage what's left of the ship. The crew is dead, Doctor. Your ship killed them.
Miller asks Stark to download the files from the Event Horizon and instructs Peters to go with Smith to secure the CO2 scrubbers from engineering. Weir pathetically pleads with Miller, but Miller is fed up with this shit. Once they are away, Miller intends to vaporize the Event Horizon with TAC missiles. A reasonable response, just saying. Weir doesn't like this news, so he pushes Miller and immediately regrets it. Then, the ship's lights flicker again. It appears the Event Horizon isn't a fan of Miller's idea, because the Gravity Drive's core is now draining power again. Miller tells Stark to get the files and get out now.
You can't leave. She won't let you.
You just get your gear and get back on the Lewis and Clark, Doctor, or you'll find yourself walking home.
I am home.
Peters and Smith gather the scrubbers and start making their way back. except Peters is compelled to return. She goes back to the gravity drive room and chases what she believes is her son. She arrives at a dead end, but the kid magically appears in front of her. Then, Peters walks forward, hoping to reunite with her son. Of course, she lacks environmental awareness and falls down a massive hole in the floor. Because I don't know how YouTube is going to feel about that scene, please accept the following substitute. Kid walks away looking high as fuck, probably going back into that hotbox going on behind him. Weir makes it to the gravity drive and finds Peters dead on the ground. He feels bad for a moment, but only for a moment, because Weir is about to have a mental breakdown. Weir finds himself back in his home in Daylight Station, admittedly the one time it's ever shown again. He sees his wife, Claire, getting herself ready for something. She then vanishes and is now next to the bathtub. Uh-oh, methinks we're about to pry into those bad thoughts in his noggin. He pleads with her, but she doesn't seem to even act like he's there. Claire, without getting into too much detail, takes her own life, and Weir is made to watch. The ship wants him to suffer, but Naked Wife returns to comfort Billy, before she decides that Billy is too comfy and removes his jelly orbs from their chassis. Notice how I showed you no footage, and that's because the scene can be kinda heavy for some viewers. Just take my word for it. It's an uncomfortable watch. But mostly it's because YouTube. I would have done it. I really would have. Cooper finishes securing the hull and tells Smith to get ready to depart. Smith is more than ready to fuck off from this thing, but he notices Weir leaving the airlock. Smith tries to stop him, but Weir isn't listening. He's with the ship now. Smith gets Miller on the line and reports that Weir was messing around on the Lewis and Clark. Miller then notices one of the explosive charges is now missing.
Come again, sir?
They connect the dots pretty quick, and Smith refuses to let Weir blow up the ship after he just fixed it. Smith searches frantically to find the explosive, and Miller rushes to aid him. The Lewis and Clark gets Dark-Starred and Cooper gets Talbied. Don't get the reference? Watch my Dark-Star video after this. Miller sits down by the airlock, feeling defeated and angry.
Shit! Where the fuck am I going? Why is this shit gonna happen to me?
Oh! Cooper's alive! But he's pretty far away from the event horizon now. I mean, that piece of debris straight up sent him into orbit. Cooper could try riding the debris back down, but someone else already did that in another movie, and Cooper wants to be original. So he instead sets his oxygen tanks to purge and becomes Iron Man.
Come on, yes! 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 Here I come, motherfucker!
The odds of making it back to the ship using your CO2 as a propulsion system from that distance is very little, by the way. DJ is in medical, packing up, when Miller gets on comms and warns DJ about Weir.
Don't worry about Weir. I'll take care of him.
He did not take care of him. Weir kicks DJ's ass and then invites him over to play doctor. DJ did not want to play doctor. Miller arrives in medical, but he's too late to help DJ. He's just sort of hanging out now. If only YouTube wasn't so squeamish, we get to see the aftermath. Oh well, guess you'll have to watch the movie then, huh? Which you totally fucking should, by the way, because it's a really kick-ass movie. Miller has decided that he's had enough, and decides now is the time to go full Dead Space mode, baby. He gets a bolt gun and heads for the bridge.
You don't want to leave your ship? You never will.
At the bridge, Miller looks cautiously for Weir, but ends up finding Stark, alive, fortunately. He helps her up, reaches for his bolt gun. The bolt gun is gone. Suddenly, I'm not so brave anymore. Weir then turns his chair like he's a Bond villain, revealing himself with the bolt gun now in his possession.
What happened to your eyes?
Where we're going, we won't need eyes to see.
Weir explains that though he built the Event Horizon to travel the stars, the ship tore a hole through the universe and crossed over to a dimension of pure chaos and evil. Wherever the Event Horizon ended up, it returned to us not as a ship, but as a living beast. He then says that the ship now has its new crew, and it's ready to return. He activates the gravity drive set for 10 minutes. Stark tries to get the jump on Weir, but it didn't work out too well, and she gets thrown out like a toy Andy was done playing with. Miller then decides he wants a piece of Weir too, but the fun stops when Weir pulls a bolt gun on him.
You miss me, you blow out the hull.
What makes you think I'll miss?
Right, I'm back! Oh, shit, I can't stop. Hey!
Oh my fucking god, he made it! Yes!
What? Who the fuck? Oh, shit!
No! What the fuck? Well, Weir fucking blew out the window and then missed Miller after he said he wasn't going to. So you proved nothing to us, Weir, other than you're still a bumbling idiot, and you have no eyes now. Keep taking L's, dude. So Weir's gamer chair comes loose, and despite hanging on for dear life, he isn't able to hold on and gets blasted into space. Weir is a terrible space pirate, even with the powers of hell on his side. Miller is able to pull himself back to safety, but Stark calls out to him. The door starts to close, but Miller jams it open with a tool. He reaches out for Stark. She can hardly reach, but after some effort, they make it just in time before the door closes shut. The alarms for the forward airlock start blaring, and the two move out, preparing for another fight with Weir.
Don't hit me!
He fucking made it! The fucking legend made it! So Cooper is now safe. At least I would say that if the gravity drive wasn't about to go active. To make matters worse, the expert doesn't want to turn it off. So Miller's plan is to detonate the charges, separate themselves from engineering, and use the forward decks as a lifeboat. Stark and Cooper will stay behind to prep the forward decks, while Miller goes out to manually arm the bombs.
Miller?
Close this door behind me, Lieutenant.
Miller starts prepping the charges to detonate, and Cooper finds himself in a haunted house movie trope. The ship is bleeding now, and that green tank in the center of the room fills with blood. They escape for now, though, but the ship is angry. Miller arms the last bomb and gets on the horn to tell Stark. Their conversation is cut short, however, when Eddie comes back to show us his audition for the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, Miller has now found himself in the gravity drive room, and the door just shut behind him. Also, I'm pretty sure the whole place wasn't on fire earlier. Miller gets smacked, and Eddie blames him for leaving him on the Goliath. Miller declares that Eddie is dead, and that whatever he is, isn't real. It then turns out to be none other than Dr. Weir! Oh, and his eyes are back. Well, that's awfully nice of the Event Horizon to do that. Weir gives him the villain monologue of, "You will not escape me now, blah ha ha," and says that it's time to go to hell.
You know nothing. Hell is only a word, a reality.
Weir shows Miller visions of the crew being tortured in hell, the future that awaits them on the other side. Miller finds a scrubber and beats the shit out of Weir. But Weir isn't amused and beats Miller's ass so hard he makes waves in the coolant pool, which that can't feel good on the skin being in that funky shit. Suffer my puns. Miller pleads for Weir to take him and not the crew, but Miller is in no position to be negotiating terms, so that doesn't work out. The gateway begins to activate. Miller struggles to grab the detonator, and Weir floods Miller's mind with more horrible images. But despite his best efforts to stop Miller,
Yes. I see.
the central corridor splits open, and the forward decks separate from the gravity drive. The crew has made it, but the rear section, along with Miller and Weir, pass through the other dimension. The crew look back to see that there is nothing left of the aft section, and that Miller is gone. Thanks to his efforts, however, the crew has survived. 72 days later, the ship is picked up by rescue craft. For the second time now, but this time, the rescue teams are fortunate enough to find survivors and are ready to take them back home.
It's all right. It's okay. You're safe now.
Justin, Cooper.
They're fine. They're fine. They're with us.
You're with us.
Oh, did you think it was that easy? You can't leave the event horizon. She won't let you. Cue that funky shit! And that was Event Horizon. My thoughts? This movie is a fucking delight to behold for sci-fi and horror fans alike. It knows its concept, and it knows how to have a good time with it. Now, I may have had my gripes, but I would say those were mostly nitpicks, as they don't really detract from the overall viewing experience. At least for me. Event Horizon had the idea of being a haunted house movie with a sci-fi skin, and it delivers exactly what I asked for. A fun ride on a spaceship that can travel straight to hell itself. The characters are believable as first responders, and fear of the unknown plays extremely well into the sci-fi genre, as well as the haunted house genre. The thing that shocks me the most is just how synonymous the two genres can be, and just how powerful they are when blended together into this amalgamation of space horror. If you go into this movie willing to let loose and have fun, there is so much fun to be had here. And it's one of the few movies that truly gets me in the Halloween spirit, so I hope it did for you as well. Fortunately, this is just a movie, and a spaceship that can travel to hell doesn't actually exist. So I'll sleep just fine tonight. As for all of you, I wish you all a happy Halloween, and I'll see you all in the... What the fuck's going on? Big. Happy Halloween.
Ave atque vale. Hail and farewell.